If you're the sort of person who enjoys flexing their grey matter, there are few things more satisfying than a really good puzzle. There have been a number of video games over the years that have had us scratching our noodles in confusion, with the likes of Professor Layton making frequent outings to perplex and frustrate us in equal measure. But what do you do if you prefer your brain teasers with a dash of mortal peril? We've already taken a flick through the Resident Evil back catalogue to bring you our favourite enigmas from that franchise, but if you've already exhausted Chris Redfield's puzzle-solving prowess, then perhaps it's time to take a look in the direction of Konami's equally spookums series, Silent Hill. Since the franchise's first title, 1999's Silent Hill, we've been treated to more head-scratchers than Pyramid Head can shake that big old knife at. So for this list, we'll be rifling through 2 decades of survival horror to showcase the very best. We will aim to leave out major plot points where possible, but there is still a minor risk of us crossing into Spoilerbush city limits. You have been warned. I'm the ever-mysterious Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 best Silent Hill puzzles. Number 10. Doll Parts, Silent Hill 4, The Room. Although considered to be one of the weaker entries in the franchise, Silent Hill 4 still has 1 or 2 mind-boggling puzzles on offer. One that particularly stuck with us, even if only for the amount of stress we went through to complete it, is the Doll Parts puzzle. While exploring the forest world, protagonist Henry Townsend and his companion Eileen come across a wheelchair in which the torso of a mannequin is sat. Looks like you've got some limbs to find, friend, but don't be too eager, because the whole time you'll be pursued by the gun-toting serial killer Walter Sullivan. The doll bits are all scattered around various wells, and you'll need to ensure that you've got a torch handy in order to illuminate them well enough to fish them out. Gathering all of the pieces and putting them together will result in the doll animating and rolling away to reveal a staircase below it. It does make us wonder why we couldn't have just pushed the wheelchair away ourselves, but I suppose it's not about the destination, it's about the fun we had on the journey. Right, Eileen? She's been shot in the leg, I'm sure she's fine. Number 9. The Makeshift Handle, Silent Hill 2. Sometimes in life, you've just got to play the cards you're dealt, and it's that sort of can-do attitude that helps James Sunderland escape Toluca Prison in Silent Hill 2. Trapped in the nightmarish penitentiary, James's only hope of escape is via a hatch in the west wing, but sadly for him, it doesn't have a handle. Fortunately, he's not about to let his dark, spoopy surroundings or a few creepy monsters get him down, so he must set about putting together a makeshift handle so he can get the heck out of there. On his journey, James will come across a small wax doll in one of the cells, and after completing another puzzle which requires the insertion of tablets into a set of gallows, his attention will also be drawn to a conspicuously placed horseshoe. These items may not seem to be of much importance in and of themselves, but when they're melted together using a lighter, they furnish James with the necessary tool to make his escape. In reality, we're not wholly certain that the wax would hold strong enough to allow the hatch to be opened, but hey, who are we to argue with video game logic? Number 8. Flame Purifies All, Silent Hill 3. In the world of chemistry, there are many things that can be mixed together to create an interesting result. For example, minty sweets plus Diet Cola makes a fun but slightly sticky volcano, and according to Silent Hill 3, pork liver, matches and oxydol mixed in a bucket makes a particularly potent fire, strong enough to completely burn away a painting. We're not 100% sold on the science of the second example, but then again, if I've learned anything from video games over the years, it's that they are always totally grounded in reality, so I'm probably wrong to doubt the logic. Indeed, whilst searching the Hilltop Mall, Heather Mason comes across a painting that must be burned in order to proceed. Rather than requiring the player to simply ignite the thing with, say, some matches, they must instead create a concoction of random items they've found around the mall. If you're playing on easy or normal modes, there's a chemistry book that can be found which will explain the necessary methodology, but if you're playing on hard, then you're on your own and it's going to require a bit of trial and error to get to the solution. You could just look it up online though, we won't judge. Much. Number 7. The Hair Box, Silent Hill 2. Here we have a classic puzzle that escape room fans will be all too familiar with. A box secured with several different locks that holds an item you need in order to progress. Whilst moseying around the rooms of Brookhaven Hospital, James Sunderland comes across a rather intriguing box bound with locks that require keys and codes in order to open them. Never one to shy away from a mystery, he sets about exploring the remainder of the building and is able to find something he needs to unlock it dotted around the facility. I'm no expert, but leaving important codes out in the open like that seems like a massive GDPR violation, but whatever. So, what's in the box? A key, an item of great value, Further instruction. No, in fact the box, somewhat confusingly, contains a lock of hair, and it's at this point that you realise that the real puzzle is not in trudging around trying to find a bunch of keys or random digits, but in what you're supposed to do with the box's contents. We're not going to spoil what it's for, but it's definitely worth hanging on to if you've got any hopes of making it out alive, or clipping it to your hair to have slightly longer hair. That's not it. Number 6. A Tale of Birds Without a Voice, Silent Hill. I'm not sure what it is that's given the developers of survival horrors the impression that we're all piano virtuosos, but between Resident Evil Village's insistence that we have to read proper sheet music and now this, I'm starting to think I should have paid more attention to my music teacher, Mrs. Bad Crumble. Upon entering the music room, we find a grand piano, which aside from needing a serious dose of disinfectant owing to all the blood, has a few broken keys. Alas, plinking and plonking your way through chopsticks isn't going to reveal any secrets here, so you're going to need to figure out the riddle that's been very kindly left on a nearby chalkboard. The poem itself, which talks about all manner of birds, may seem completely unrelated to the matter at hand, but trust us, it contains all the information necessary to tinkle your way to success. Worth bearing in mind, whilst you probably don't need to be Bill Oddie in order to work out what the verse means, it will at least help to have some idea of what colour each of the birds in question is. Once you've nailed that, you've solved about 10% of the puzzle, so congratulations, my dude! Number 5. The Shakespeare Puzzle, Hard Mode, Silent Hill 3. For most of us, the words William and Shakespeare conjure up horrifying memories of being forced to read Macbeth aloud in front of a classroom full of mean 13-year-olds. Hopefully, however, you manage to at least retain some information about the bard's works, because you're going to need it in order to resolve this head-scratcher. Upon entering the bookstore, players will find a number of Shakey's works strewn across the floor and will need to work out in which order they go in order to get the code for a nearby door. On normal mode, it's fairly straightforward. Just juggle the books around on the shelf until the 4-digit number scrawled on the spines lines up. On hard mode, however, you're going to need to know the plots to Romeo and Juliet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, and Hamlet, and be able to identify each from a cryptic clue. As though that weren't enough mental gymnastics, you're then going to have to do some maths in order to get the final code. How on earth you're supposed to work this out without using an online guide is beyond me. We can only assume that kids in 2003 were getting plenty of omega-3 or whatever it is that makes your brain work good. Number 4. The Plate Poem, Silent Hill. Ah, fantastic. A puzzle that I can only assume was designed by my nan on account of all the fancy decorated plates. Whilst navigating the seemingly endless rooms and corridors of Alchemilla Hospital, Harry Mason will come across a whole load of coloured plates, each emblazoned with an intricate design. The use for those items won't remain a mystery for long, however, as players will soon discover a door into which they fit nice and snug, though the order in which they go might not be immediately apparent. If you trouble yourself to look around the room, you'll find a poem hung on the wall that talks of fluffy clouds, sunny skies, and definitely doesn't become all dark and weird at the end. All players need to do is work out how the prose links to the plates, and boom! Puzzle solved, door unlocked, and protagonist off on his merry way to more horror. Someone's even been kind enough to put in half of the plates for you already, meaning less time spent trying to work out this brain teaser and more time to spend seeing the sights and soaking in the ambience. Keep an eye out for the locals though, they're a bit wacky. Number 3. Vices and Nuts, Silent Hill 3. If you've ever played a survival horror game, you'll know that very few items you come across along the way are completely without use, and a great example of this is Silent Hill 3's Vices and Nuts puzzle. We'll find a walnut inside a glass cabinet in the jewellery store. How odd, one might think to oneself. Perhaps someone dropped part of their lunch amidst all of the spookums. Not so, dear viewer, and you might want to hang on to that delicious snack because as it turns out it's going to come in very useful not too far down the line. After searching a little longer, players will come across a rather disgusting looking vice into which the walnut can be inserted in order to reveal the Moonstone. Sadly, there aren't any Clefairies around to evolve, so it isn't immediately clear why you'd need such an object, but press forward a little more and you'll come across a door onto which, quite handily, a moon is painted. Somewhat ironically, there's a nutcracker to be found later in the game, but you need that to bust open a locked door instead, because obviously. Number 2. The Astrology Puzzle, Silent Hill. We're not much for astrology here at Team TripleJump, so while some may think it's not a good idea to put out videos while Mercury is in retrograde, myself and Tiny Peter and Ashton couldn't give less of a toss. Fortunately, in order to solve Silent Hill's astrology puzzle, your knowledge of star signs need not extend beyond a simple awareness of what creature or inanimate object represents each one. In one of the first game's trickier puzzles, you'll come across a room in which there are several zodiac symbols, each with a numerical value scribed underneath. All you need to do is work out the relationship between the pictures and the numbers, then apply the same logic to the remaining ones. Doing so will release the Stone of Time, an artifact without which our plucky protagonist Harry Mason cannot hope to proceed. It's a simple enough concept, but in execution it's not all that straightforward. After all, what could possibly link a set of scales with the number 2, a pair of fish with 0, and a crab with the number 10? All we'll say is, there's no need to call Mystic Meg. Obviously, we worked it out straight away, but other people might struggle a bit, so yeah. Number 1. The Brookhaven Keypad, Hard Mode. Silent Hill 3. A great mechanic that was introduced to the Silent Hill series after its first outing was the opportunity for players to choose how difficult they wished for the puzzles to be, which keeps the games challenging for those for whom this isn't their first rodeo, but accessible for anyone that doesn't know their way around a bucking bronco. On easy and normal modes, the Brookhaven Keypad is tricky enough, requiring players to flex their noggins in order to come to a solution, but on hard mode, it's downright devilish. In order to advance through the hospital, protagonist Heather must enter the correct code into the keypad on a locked door. As it's numbered 1 to 9, the chances of making a lucky guess are next to 0, and the only clue you have is a somewhat disturbing poem that goes into rather graphic detail about all of the gory things the writer would like to do to their lover. We won't spoil the solution, but suffice it to say that once we'd finished reading the prose and chucking up our lunches, we were dazzled by just how laterally this one had us thinking. Good work, Silent Hill. We applaud you.